Hi friends, host Eric here with not host Mark and the new robot, Raw Live. Um, we are live streaming currently, actually, and I'm live on location here in my new basement. Briefly before starting the day's work activities, I want to talk about metaphysics, physics, and the progression of human history, or it should be titled Physics, Metaphysics, and the Progression of Human History because it's the physics that comes first. So if you think about humanity as engaging in fully human civilization some 10,000 years ago or so, assuming those historical guesstimations are approximately right. The first order of business was space magic. Space magic being all of the engineering feats that humanity has managed to accomplish over the course of human history, including such things as the lever. And I was tripping out on a socket wrench yesterday because I was using a socket wrench to bolt together this wagon that I made that's actually caused quite a bit of conflict yesterday. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the socket wrench is an amazing piece of space magic. It turns something this way with resistance, and then you turn it this way, it goes without only a little bit of resistance will cause it to not pull it, and then you can switch directions on it, right? So it's an amazing bit of space magic that makes possible what would seem to be impossible, namely the turning of a wrench, turning a bolt with a wrench without lifting the wrench off of the bolt. So um, the development of space magic took a long, long time, a very long time. The first real advancements in time magic, the first aspects of time magic to be manifest were art and drawings and eventually writing, text. And it's these symbols that comprise the metaphysical world that is communicable to others. Not all aspects of the medical physical world are communicable to others. And and that's often where we run afoul of the metaphysical and physical worlds run afoul of one another, is a mistaking of which aspects of the metaphysical reality are communicable and which ones are not. And anyway, so basically the printing press is one of the first major advancements in time magic. In other words, it makes it possible in a way that was much more laborious prior to that for an individual to clone the entity, the sub-entity that he creates to represent some metaphysical reality. So among the first texts to be widely disseminated was, in the West anyway, was the Bible, and it comprised the bulk of the metaphysical world for Europe in, the Middle Ages, Dark Ages, stuff like that. As the fluidity of symbolic representations of reality, or abstract realities, or metaphysical realities, became more fluid, and that really is what the development of time magic was all about, was making communicability enabled. Then more books got written and more books got reproduced, and each of those metaphysical realities that gets reproduced and gets disseminated and gets consumed by other agents then becomes part of a larger metaphysical reality for each of those agents. So everybody who experiences ideation of this sort, to some extent, the ideation becomes part of their own reality to the extent that they understand it and internalize it, or that it's resonant enough with them to make an impact for them to remember it, and or to the extent to which they ideate like this. Obviously, the ideation is not the only way to manifest an ontology, and by ontology I mean a process of identity. So I may understand my own identity through metacognition, through ideation, and link that process-oriented self to other abstractions that provide purpose and meaning. God is obviously a major player in human metaphysics from the outset. And regardless, even atheists acknowledge the significance of God in human history. They just may say, well, it's a human construct or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But note that we can never discuss or even know it possible to discuss anything that has not been observed. So one of the problems that those who critique theism have is they conflate the physical and metaphysical worlds. They say, well, we're going to use physical world existential tests and attribute metaphysical existence accordingly. It doesn't work like that, and it's insane, frankly. So the point is, as we progress through human history, the metaphysical world expanded to incorporate it will always expand to incorporate the negation of whatever it is that moves to take predominance. There's a natural balancing impact between ideas that causes a certain equilibrium. The thing is, what ends up happening is certain bad ideas become eliminated over time as viable options. In other words, they gain certain metaphysical statuses, and those statuses persist and form axiomatic walls of the metaphysical world within a given culture. So all of humanity almost views certain things as shameful and doesn't openly do them because they feel guilty. This notion of guilt, it's a metaphysical one that has done a lot in defining how humans interact with one another, and it's an important one because it ties to justice and fairness. It's the link between the T's and the F's, and it helps us to understand why there's so much difficulty in humans determining the right course of action. So all this is coming up to the fact that as we enter into the modern era, contemporary times, we've liberated information. We have pretty much full information fluidity. I'm live streaming this right now. I'm making a video by recording it concurrently, and I will upload it so that it's accessible as an archived object on the main channel to facilitate communicability of these ideas. All of which is only possible because the metaphysical realm now is more reflective of its nature. That is to say, time unconstrained. The fact that I'm making this now and it's live streaming doesn't mean you can't watch it later instead. Now, you can't go backwards in time per se in the conditional world, like you can pretend you can go back to when this video wasn't made. No, you can't do that. But you can experience when this video was made later, and you can imagine what it would be like if this video weren't made, and you can do conditionality undos. Well, let's imagine instead of this going the way it did, that all of a sudden a fire broke out right here. What would happen? Those sort of things can be done in the conditional world. The world of conditionality is the metaphysical world. In other words, our symbolic representations of reality allow us to detach reality from time in a fashion that allows us to explore possibilities without actually doing them. So now that we're at this moment in history, the question is, what's the path forward? How does humanity go forward from this? Well, in my opinion, the human race is burdened with shitloads of baggage from a time period before information was fluid. Humanity developed its protocols in a time inflexible world that didn't allow conditionality much sway. Things that really mattered were objects. Things that have real value were objects. And a tractor was worth a lot of money, and what wasn't really worth a lot of money was something where people talked about tractors for a while. Things have changed. Every object gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper because objects have less and less value because there are more and more objects in the world. we all have all the objects we need. I have all the space magic I need in my tool set. I've got clamps, I've got socket wrenches, I've got drills, I've got blah, blah, blah. I don't need any more tools. And I have limited need to adjust my space. So, for example, we have a fully functioning society in which we've got electricity and running water and all that shit like that. So most of us are freed up from the need to address spatial concerns. In other words, space magic has more or less finished its work. We are now engaged in the time magic period, in which time objects become more valuable than space objects, so that what's way more valuable than a tractor is a successful YouTube channel. Now, this is not that YouTube channel, but maybe someday it will be. And the point being, we're not doing anything. We're not making anything, objects, space objects. We aren't real in any physical sense of the word. This channel isn't an object. It's a legal fiction of a corporation, and it's an entity that is comprised of a community's perceptions about it. And basically that's and the time objects that comprise its archive. So in that capacity, you're looking at a world that views things very, very differently. People will pay money for digital objects in games. I did. I paid money for players in NFL Madden. What's it called? I don't know what it's called. Like it's the one where you collect trading cards, digital trading cards, not real, not objects. But see, the transition began a while back. So a baseball card is not valuable because of its utility as an object. It's valuable because of its time objectness. That it's about this guy and it's got this picture and it's got blah blah blah. It's about the imprinted time object upon the space object. And books became important in the canon of literature and the canon of what back when there was a finite enough, when there was a small enough number of them for that to be meaningful at all, which is not anymore. You've got the situation where people understood well the value of a book is not the paper and the binding, it's the words within it. That's the beginning of when people start to understand that time objects are just as significant and as real or more real than space objects. So we now live in a world where it's pretty clear that if you have a very low ceiling of value to which you can provide society if you are a master craftsman making chairs and tables and stuff, or a carpenter. The amount of value you can provide to society is limited because no matter how perfect your chairs and shit are, you're only going to sell them to one person, and it can only be sold once. Whereas a video I make can be seen thousands and thousands and thousands of times without anybody taking it away or ruining it in the process of using it, because it's not a space object, it's a time object. So that reality, the duplicability, the fact that time objects aren't subject to the law of non-contradiction, which says nothing can both be and not be in the same time, space, and context. Well, you can in the world of conditionality. That's what conditionality is the allowance of that. Well, let's imagine now that it wasn't that. Now let's imagine it were that. Now, you could say in each of those situations, you can't imagine it's both, but you can imagine it's both, in which case you have contradictory premises and you can prove anything's valid. In other words, there are no such constraints in the world of conditionality. So the moment that humanity is at is one where it needs to figure out what to do moving forward, and the answer is very simple. First of all, we need to stop being slaves to our own value biases that are inherent and implicit. So that means cognitive functions. It means going, all right, well, the reason I shouldn't be making decisions about X because I'm bad at the cognitive functions that are relevant. Each manner of attention is equal in its fundamental legitimacy, its ontological legitimacy, but they are not equal in their legitimacy in terms of application in certain contexts. So, for example, when it comes to public policy, we need to use TI as the evaluatory metric. In other words, it needs to be logically consistent with our fundamental values as determined by TI and FI, in other words, individualist concerns. When we're dealing with how to position things for public consumption, we need to respond to FE. When we're dealing with how to accomplish goals, once they've been determined, once they pass TI scrutiny, then we go to TE. When we're talking about how to make sure we're safe and comfortable for the next few months, we go to SI. When we're talking about how to maximize opportunities, we go to NE. When we're talking about what's the best choice of a set, we go to NI. When we're talking about, like, let's put the handle on the shit, we go to SE. The thing is, there are contexts in which certain matters of attention are more effective, more appropriate than others. And the biggest problem that humanity has right now is a failure to parse out public policy to the domain of TI where it belongs. That's why we have people like President Trump, SEing the fuck out of everything. None of the shit passes TI scrutiny because he doesn't use TI like that. He uses TI in the physical aspect. It needs to be metaphysical TI all the way. So anyway, that's the truth about humanity, cognitive functions, and the future. What's going to happen? Well, individualism, particularism, is infectious in an unavoidable way. It becomes increasingly difficult for one individual to watch a third individual negatively affect a second individual under TEFE, whatever kind of bullshit justifications they have, without being appalled. Because increasingly, as we encounter all these different people, like for me, I've got all these friends all around the world who I talk to on the internet and stuff, and I understand their various cultures and stuff and laws and systems as oppressive in one way or another, and same as mine. I see the individuals as more important than the rules that hurt them, and increasingly everybody's going to see it that way. It's unavoidable. Who's gonna pay taxes on all their income when they can invest in Bitcoin and or a more dark currency, cryptocurrencies that can't get traced by the government and can't be taxed? Who's going to say it's immoral of me to invest some of my money in these cryptocurrencies that are tax-free? Is anyone going to say that's immoral? Is anybody going to refuse to do that because they want to give more money to the government? No, because nobody sees taxes as legitimate. If you did, you'd consider it stealing. But nobody does, because it's not. Gradually, these inconsistencies between people's behavior and habits and cognitive assumptions and realities, other cognitive assumptions and habits and stuff, when they conflict, ultimately, they produce the solution. And the solution is clash, discursive clash, which resolves in the defeat of one party. That's the important thing. People need their bad ideas to sting. They need to be publicly humiliated by defending them and getting crushed. It's the best thing that can possibly happen to humanity, for bad ideas to suffer defeat publicly. It's what's required, because they don't go back to those bad arguments again. They got destroyed using that bad argument last time. They won't go back to it again. All of a sudden, well, that bad idea has less underpinning to it. And if they can't find better ground, suddenly they stop arguing about it anymore, because they might still believe it, but they're going to lose the argument and they're going to feel dumb. So then all of a sudden it becomes embarrassing to make that argument. That's how culture changes. That's why it's embarrassing now to say, let's lynch those black people for looking at those white women. Nobody would get caught dead saying it in public. It used to be said in public, and guess what else used to happen? Black people used to get lynched for that. Does it happen anymore? Not really. And the reason is not because the behavior's changed. It's because the discourse changed. it became vulgar and embarrassing to engage in that discourse. And it's the discourse that allows the behavior to happen. So remember, discourse first. We'll win this shit one word at a time. Thanks for watching Talking with Fin People. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese and rock and roll.